And we're talking about Spine number 26 in our Criterion Creep, and that is The Long Good Friday, directed by John Mackenzie from 1980. Harold Shand, played by Bob Hoskins, is the boss of the London underworld and is attempting to forge a partnership with the American Mafia in a bid to legitimize their operation through real estate by redeveloping the London Docklands. Of course, at this very same time as the mob boss is coming to England, played by the now familiar Eddie Constantine in a non-dubbed form, Shand is being targeted by unknown assailants who murder his best friend Colin, attempt blowing up his mother, and literally blowing up some of his business fronts. At first, Harold tries to pretend this is all cool and conceal this series of brazen attacks against him and keep those things secret so as to continue the veil of control he has in his own yard. But this all comes crumbling down when his pub is blown up right in front of everyone's eyes and he has to go take care of things himself. So when you don't know who is blowing your shit up, I guess you do what Harold does and knife up the backside of a black guy. And then round up local hoods you don't care for or trust and hang them upside down on meat hooks in a meat cooler, waiting for someone to come up with answers. Harold finds out what's going on, though, in the form of his dirty cop friend who tells him through their legit investigation that those bombs blowing up his businesses, they resemble the handiwork of the IRA. Harry doesn't give a shit who's blowing stuff up and figures he can deal with them the same way he deals with all of his enemies. But, of course, this all starts to cross over with the fact that his right-hand man, Jeff, he has kind of been the result of all these problems coming down on Harry on this particular long Good Friday weekend. And apparently the whole story that we find out is that Jeff has become involved with the IRA via the dirty counselor that they're dealing with, a man named Harris, who they've been working with as far as like these building deals, working with the unions, and that's all coming down through the IRA's influence and keeping things on the up and up, keeping business running smoothly. But they're also now having to steal money and bring it to the IRA. It's all very convoluted. Then, of course, Jeff gets a big head, and they try knocking over one of these transfers of money on the IRA, where 3 of their men get killed. And one thing has led to another, and the IRA are basically going for revenge on the fingered Harold Shand, who has had nothing to do with this. And when he finds out that Jeff has brought all this upon him, he murders him with a broken bottle. Yeah. And so Harry decides, I can deal with these IRA guys, even though every single person in the film is saying, no, you don't understand. You can't just deal with these people the way that you think. They're nuts. They're like, they don't think like you. They don't just think in terms of money and whatnot. But he's like, nah, I know what I'm doing. So he arranges a meet and takes that Councilman Harris with him. They go to a racetrack where all dealings happen, I guess, in England. And of course, he plans on just buying them off because I guess like $5,000 was stolen, but he's going to pay him $60,000 just to cool things off. But this turns out to all just be a big old double cross, and Harold just murders the 2 heads of the IRA down in London, as well as this councilman, and just cleans his hands of the whole matter. It's like, that's it. What's the worst that could happen now? I've won. But so he returns and he goes to meet with the American gangster, but he's like done with this. He's like seen this happen before in Cuba, and he wants nothing to do with the IRA or these problems. Here he cuts quite the promo on America and talking about how this is Britain, we get things done. And then he goes off to dinner, and Harold's mistakes come back to bite him in the ass.
You don't say.
That's how it goes. So,
right.
RJ, have you seen or have you heard of Long Good Friday before this week?
I had never heard of it, and to be very honest, I looked at what the next movie was, I think 3 times, and I kept forgetting what it was, and I didn't even remember what it was until you brought me the actual physical movie, and I watched it. I don't know why, for whatever reason, it wouldn't stick with me, man.
Huh.
So I had never seen this. This was a first watch for me.
So you went in cold. So you can go ahead and just start telling me what you think of this movie.
Oh, man. That's a lot of pressure, you know. I'm not usually used to talking about what I think about movies. Geez. Okay. I think this movie is all right. I don't think it's stellar. I don't think it's great. Maybe it is. Maybe I missed what makes this movie so good. This was a movie, though, when I watched it, the whole time I was kind of wondering, what makes this a Criterion movie? Like, what is the big thing in this movie that maybe like sets it off, right? Like, so for Sid and Nancy, like, I feel like the thing about that movie was the story they were telling, the apparent great performance by Gary Oldman, you know, and then like just the circumstances of what they were doing and when they did it. So it's like I can kind of understand why that was in there, even though I didn't like it. And even like Salo, the movie I hated, I understand why it's in the Criterion Collection. It's like, okay, I get this. Like, this is a fancy movie that they put in there. But this one, I gotta say, I still don't really know why it's in here. Not that it's bad or anything. I think it's fine. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it's like great. I think it works better as like, I don't want to say like a cult movie, but it's like dudes like you who watch like 1980s like gangster movies. Like it would fit. It would be like in that list, but not the Criterion list. So, anyways,
sure.
Bob Hoskins is fucking dope. He's the coolest. I love him. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of my favorite movies. And Shmi and Hook, he's the coolest. So I'll always love him, and he's wicked as like a little British bulldog, just chomping around at people and stuff like that. Helen Mirren was super cool. I gotta say, as a younger lady, she was a stone cold fox. Yes, indeed.
She's still pretty foxy.
She is. Yeah, she is. She's a charming lady. Patty Kosygin from those Edgar Wright movies and last week's Alphaville. He was pretty cool, but I found his real voice weird.
Eddie Constantine's Italian voice. I think that. Yeah. But I think like I'm not sure how much of that was a put on, but like because like I was reading like he was always dubbed. Like he was like an American actor who was like in a bunch of French movies, and so he always just wound up being dubbed. And so this was like an unusual thing for him where he had to actually talk. But I thought he was like, I mean, he was just a gangster. Like it was totally in line. I mean, this is like, because the movie was actually like made in 1979, but didn't get released for like a year. And like, I mean, it's totally post like Coppola, Godfather, and like American Gangster stuff. So I mean, that's kind of where he was with that. I think.
No, yeah, like I think it was fine. I just thought like his voice was weird. But anyways, I'll just rattle through like, so that's what I think about the movie as a whole.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm in agreement with you, or at least I'm on the same page. Okay. So when I first watched this movie back, like it was kind of that period of time when everyone loved British gangster movies. So it's like that late 90s, early 2000s when like Guy Ritchie was like the director. Everyone was watching Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Everyone watched Snatch. I saw Snatch like 3 times in theater. I thought that movie was just like amazing.
You nerd.
I know. That's back when I could like had time to go to like theaters multiple times and like just go see movies I loved. And like Sexy Beast. There was like Gangster #1. A few years later there was like Layer Cake. A few years earlier there's movies like Croupier, which is kind of in the same ballpark. A movie called The Krays, which is like a biopic on the Kray brothers. And then like when you started watching that stuff, everyone started going back a little bit and like going back to like kind of like the British gangster like films. And there's like Get Carter, which is probably the most famous. And then like there's Long Good Friday that gets brought up a lot. There'll be another movie actually we'll be watching down the road called Mona Lisa, also starring Bob Hoskins. And I remember being really good, but I also remember this movie being really, really good. Like, and like, yeah, I had like, when I first watched this movie, I loved it. I thought it was so amazing. I couldn't wait to get a copy of it on DVD. Because like there was the Criterion, but I think it like went out of print like years and years ago. But Anchor Bay put it out, and the copy I lent you has like the hilarious slipcover with like
that's awesome.
It's so like inappropriate. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. How it's like even considered like a cult movie in the way that like people talk about cult movies, like grindhouse cinema.
Well, that's what I mean. Like I is what I was saying. It's like I don't want to use that term either. It's like, but I can see why other people would be able to. Or you can easily label it as such.
Yeah. So yeah, there's like, I mean, so I've always been like a fan of like crime movies, like 70s thrillers essentially. And then Like, so I mean, yeah, like in British crime films, I guess like the appeal with them has always been that they're always a bit nastier and like less upbeat than like American films.
Yeah.
They're always like a little bit grimier. Like, 'cause I mean, like England is like an old country. Like it's been around for thousands of years as a society, and
You can't prove that.
I guess not, Hollow Earth man. And so you have like this like really lived in city that's just like being built on top of itself, and so it always like has like a griminess and a lived in quality that you just don't get particularly like out west in North America, where it's like everything's new, and if anything gets a little too old it gets bulldozed. They don't do that there, not to the level at least that we do here. So everything always has like, I don't know, sinks, and like bathrooms are always a little bit filthier, and there seemed to be like an aesthetic that kicked in like the 60s and 70s where like British film just always seemed like gross and like brown. And so
that might be with like Quadrophenia. That's the oldest one I can think of, where you see like you see dudes like in those communal bathhouses, and it's like so dirty, and then they go and eat like beans and shit, and you're just like, oh man, England. You're like, England's so gross
in their underpants.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, because I guess like John Mackenzie, the director of this, he started off as an assistant to Ken Loach, who basically like is like, I guess the cliche is like he's the kitchen sink filmmaking. Like it's just like like it is brown filmmaking, like poor people. Like that's what he like. That's what he like. That's what he like shot in. So like that carries over, and like that was a big influence like on British film. Like you watch like their television, everything's always gray, dark, grimy, tea stained. Like it's just always dirty. And I mean, yeah. So watching Long Good Friday again, I don't know. There just seemed to be like the first hour or so kind of like not much happened, and I was seriously kind of like, what's so special about this movie? Like I don't get it. Like, but then like I think because like at that point I was like, well, nothing's going on. It wasn't until the pub gets bombed, and that's like when the movie kind of picks up again, and I'm like, okay. Right, and then like I started remembering scenes because it's been years since I'd watched this, and I'm like, okay, right, then that happens, and then the boat scene happens, and the boat scene's really good, like with Jeff and stuff like that, and like I forgot about like him getting just stabbed in the throat and that sweet blood geyser, and then like then Bob Hoskins coming off the boat and just covered in the blood, and there's like this like great tracking shot that was like shot handheld, and like the movie has a totally different vibe to it. And then from that point on, I started being, oh yeah, no, I enjoyed this movie. Like, but, yeah, I can definitely see where you're asking, like, I don't know why this is in the Criterion Collection, because it's kind of it's just like an odd fit as far as like why it's there, and especially like in the line of like all these movies that we've been watching. It's kind of like, because John Mackenzie, this is his only film in the Criterion Collection, and it's also his best movie. Like, because a lot of his stuff is like you read it and you're like, oh okay, like no one has ever talked about this thing other than when they talk about Long Good Friday, and there's not a lot about this movie written. I tried looking like the essay that comes with the old Criterion DVD that I looked on their website for, not so great. I read like I found a book online just talking about like British gangster movies, and there wasn't really too much about it. Like it kind of delved into like the political backdrop that the movie was made with, and I mean, it's not super, it doesn't grab me too much like the way that it's been talked about. But I mean, when I think about this movie, I don't think there's like, I don't know, there's not like a real weight to it that I'm like drawn to.
The way I see it, I think there's three kinds of movies that get put into the Criterion Collection.
Okay.
There's movies that are amazing. There's movies that are influential or historically important.
Okay.
And there's movies that shouldn't exist. So like a movie like Salo is a movie that shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
So like that's how I feel like any movie that I've come across in the Criterion, I can usually fit it in one there, in somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, this is like amazing, or yeah, this is influential or historically important, or shouldn't exist. And then when I watched this one, I was like, I don't think this is any of those things. Like, it's a decent enough movie, but I don't know. Did they just need to fill a spot? Did they just really like Bob Hoskins? Like, what's it about?
I could see, like, I mean, like I was saying, like maybe it's a movie that just hasn't like aged well into like how movies are being made now. Yeah, I don't know. It's I could imagine that like, because this movie came out like 1980, maybe it just wasn't available, and the movie like honestly probably came down to like one of the people involved with Criterion back in '98 where they were fans of the movie, and they're like, this movie needs to come out, and they are the company that put it out.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I mean, it's kind of like probably not that far off from like even like kind of with RoboCop. Maybe it was just a movie that like they wanted to put it out like the best version of it available, because back when they put it out, they wanted to make sure there was the X-rated version of this movie.
Sure.
And they wanted it on Laserdisc at the time, and they probably still had the license, which is why they then put it out on DVD. Because I mean, even like Silence of the Lambs for in that time period, that movie was like way like putting that in. It was like only like 7 years old. Like that was probably that probably is the most recent movie that they've put out at this point in the collection. Right. And then I mean, it's been out of print for years because obviously license agreements change. But I mean, yeah, I'd say like compared to like a lot of movies, like it's surprising because I like really liked this movie at one point, like a lot. I thought it was really good, but there's something just like missing from it that like pushes it over into like in one way or another, like
oral sex vampires.
Yeah, it's definitely doesn't have any of those going on in it, so that's always a bummer. But hey, maybe the person that put it in, they just really thought that the score, that main theme was amazing, which it is.
Down. Yeah, right. You pick up what I'm saying by that little ding there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the score's pretty good. So do you want to hear some stuff I liked about this movie, I guess? Since
go for
I've talked about a few things. Yeah.
One other thing I'll mention too is like, so the film got distributed by Handmade Films, which was George Harrison's production company. And they actually, there's like several Handmade Films that are in the Criterion Collection that we'll be coming across, like Life of Brian, Time Bandits, With Nail and I. So maybe it could very well have been like they had an agreement with that, and like, hey, let's get those movies out that they like, stuff that like, hey, we're gonna put out really good versions of these movies that we like from this band, like where it's kind of like these are like more like not like, actually some of those movies are excellent movies, but maybe like they're like, let's just get these movies that aren't available out. Whereas like,
sure,
and they're important in the sense that like you should see them. And in when that movie came out, and even like 1998 when it would have been released, I mean that's sort of like that post Tarantino crime popularity thing. I mean it was a really good time to get out British crime stuff. That honestly could be it. Now that I'm thinking about it that way,
it's possible, I guess.
But
I don't know.
Go on, tell us about what you liked, RJ.
So I just looked, it's a little bit of a medley, but I just want to get through some of my notes because I think my notes are funny, and I don't care if anyone else agrees. And I'm leading with stuff that's not funny, so that's a whole bait and switch. But I think the cold open is awesome, where like there's just a bunch of stuff going on for like 15 fucking minutes, and you have no idea what's going on. Like the first dialogue, I think, is like him and Helen Mirren on the boat, and he's like, want Bloody Marys? Like Bloody Marys on a Good Friday. He doesn't say that, but I thought that was cool too. But that's like the first thing people even say, and it's like 15 minutes in the movie. Like you get people driving around exchanging briefcases. There's like a cottage scene where dudes just get shot, like a car explodes. There's all this shit happening, and they don't give you any like context for it. And I think that's super cool. I like the X-Files, and they were masters of the cold open, so I think that's really good.
Yep.
I wrote down Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber, and I can't remember where it is, but there's a dude who looks just like Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber in this movie at one point.
Is he
and he just pops up for like a second or something near the start.
I think he's the guy that Bob Hoskins' buddy Peter, the gay guy, he's making the hand touchy stuff at the bar. That guy making the faces. Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's who it is. Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
This movie has really over-the-top music cues, like sound cues.
Yeah.
Like when you first see Bob Hoskins walking in like the airport or something.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he's walking, and then you hear the glass shutter, and it's like it like it's like replicated or something, and it like keeps going. But it's like there's no glass breaking, so I don't know where it comes from. So it's got like crazy over-the-top music cues. Which is cool. And then I have two notes here that are in succession, and I'm just going to read them for what they are and not give you any follow-up. Butt crack Speedos and ass slash with an exclamation point.
As we've discussed.
As we discussed. You didn't mention the butt crack Speedos, though.
Oh, is that on Pierce?
Him or someone else. Someone's in the pool, and you can see his butt crack just like hanging out of his Speedo, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, it's probably Peter or Pierce, because there's not that many dudes in that bit.
Yeah. Well, he's trying to get a little eye action from the other guy. So I guess maybe he did want to drop his butt crack a little bit.
So this was Pierce Brosnan's first movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he gets like a few mumbled lines of dialogue.
Well, he's like in the. I don't think he gets any dialogue. He's in the shower.
Yeah, when
he's like,
he's showering off, and that's about it. And he goes kind of like, and that's about it.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then not again until the very end.
And he doesn't say a damn word in there either.
Yeah, I know. Like, I thought he looked really young, but I didn't notice or know it was his youngest or his first movie.
Yeah.
There's 2 fucking dudes named Harold in this movie. Is that weird?
Is there?
Because Bob Hoskins is named Harold.
Yeah.
And then there's another point where they're talking like the informant. It's like Harold.
Well,
from
the
downtown.
councilman. His name's Harris.
Yeah, but there's another guy named Harold, isn't it? Like, because when the councilman like points him to the guy who gets the ass slash, he's like, "Yeah, it's Harold downtown."
Okay.
Or something. And I was like, "Are they both named fucking Harold? Is that like a mistake, or is that like a weird weird thing they just put in? It's like, you know what? There's a lot of people in the world who have the same fucking name.
This
so
is very true.
It's bound to fucking happen.
It's real.
Yeah, it's real. So I guess maybe that's what that is.
Yeah.
I think so. When Helen Mirren takes the Americans out to dinner, they have the most basic bitch ass or dinner orders I've ever fucking seen. All of them order. It's like, what do you want? He's like, I'll have the soup du jour and the chef special.
Yeah.
And they all order that, and it's like, are you fucking kidding me? It's like, you're just gonna like be like, oh, I don't care, just give me whatever you want. But they all do it. Oh my god, that made me so mad, Jarrett. I was like, because if like the American, it's like that guy's gonna order like a steak or something, right?
Yeah.
He's like, soup du jour and the special.
Well, he's got other things on his mind, so he's letting the other people make the decisions he doesn't care about.
Oh man,
he's about business.
That made me so mad, Jarrett. I can't even tell you. And then just 2 things. The meat locker scene is super cool.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously.
That's like one of the most iconic moments in the movie. Yeah, I hope.
Obviously. And then the end shot is so good. So just, I guess, spoilers really quickly, but the ending where it's just focusing on Bob Hoskins as the car is driving away for so long. It's just that like close up of his face, and he's like busting out his bottom teeth, and then he's like licking his lips, and oh man, so intense.
Yeah,
that shit's awesome.
Yeah, that's the only thing I really remember from the movie before I rewatched it. Was that last scene. I just remember being like, the music, the fantastic score plays over it, and you just get to see him. And it's one of my favorite things, and I think we talked about this like several episodes ago, about like one of my favorite things in movies is like that moment of like a lull or a moment of like slow down where you just get to see a character stop and think, and you get to watch them think their way through something. I remember like talking about it, I think it was like with
Sam Jackson
and Jackie Brown, like him just stopping and thinking. It's like these are moments I always think about in movies, and like nobody wants to do them because they're boring. But I mean, like this movie has such an excellent ending. Like just like you get to see him go through the whole thought process of how can he get out of this situation, and you get to see him just play it through, and he starts like, and you start getting the slow realization that there is absolutely nothing he can do. He's done. And like I'm always like I guess it's just jumping to the end of the movie. I'm always like really horrified by like Helen Mirren's face in the other car when she's like, when she's looking at him. Like it's like so like, oh my god, like it scares me so much because I'm like, fuck, like if I saw that in real life, I'd be like, oh, it's like she's like, man, she brought it. Well,
she's not Helen Mirren for nothing, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
It's the fucking queen we're talking about here, man.
Yeah, she's there's like a whole thing like there's another movie where she plays a gangster's moll. There's the movie it's Peter Greenaway's The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover. Yeah, so she gets to like do that again. Where she gets to have sex with a dude in a meat locker and piles of meat and stuff. So it's a meat.
What is this movie? I think I might need to watch this. Well,
this would go onto the list I just saw you post. Movies I hated that Jared made me watch. This is that would fall into that category, I think, for you, because people either love Peter Greenaway or they hate Peter Greenaway. It's one or the other, and I do have it. If you want to borrow it, I have a Region 2 DVD of this bad boy.
Yeah, why don't you sling me that thing? And if it is a bad one, it's gonna go into that list I made. That I didn't see you react to it in any way, so apparently it's accurate.
I literally just saw it.
Well,
Yeah.
whatever. Those movies suck. But I'll definitely watch that one movie. If only for Stone Cold Fox Helen Mirren.
Oh yeah, she gets pounded a lot in that movie.
Jesus, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, here's a note I wrote. So far, this movie is nowhere near as good as I remember it being. Actually, kind of generic. Not a lot of scope. That was what I was thinking up until the casino bombing happens, and then the tension really ratchets up for me. Yeah, that's like definitely the turn.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and like there's like the scene with like when I think it's when they're talking with the dirty cop, and like they're just talking about like the difference between villains and the IRA. Did you notice young Bricktop from Snatch in the movie?
I don't know any of the words you just said, so I'm just going to say sure.
Do you remember Bricktop from Snatch?
Nope.
No.
I did not see Snatch 3 times in theaters. I watched Snatch once at my house like 7 years ago.
Okay.
So,
well, Alan Ford, the great Alan Ford, he has like a young appearance in there, spouting off some Cockney ramblings that don't really make sense to our ears, and something about someone being locked up. But he's got a very distinctive look, and it's like, oh, it's him.
I know this Alan Ford guy.
Yeah.
I know him.
Yeah, folks, if you haven't watched the TV show Snuffbox, that was all 6 episodes, he also shows up in that, and he's amazing as is Snuffbox.
Apparently, he's in a movie called Strippers versus Werewolves. Have you seen that?
I have not.
Well, add it to the Criterion list, I guess.
I guess so. So how did you enjoy the Cockney? Were you able to follow along with the movie very well? Because this DVD had no subtitle option.
Most of the time, but
this one's not too bad.
I will say there was about 15% of the dialogue I did miss, for sure.
Okay.
But, I'm a professional. I pieced it together, and I kept on rolling. Bob Hoskins is easy to listen to. Same with Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
There's just a couple of the other guys. Like sometimes when they were talking fast, I think it was just like, oh man, I didn't catch any of that.
A couple of geezers they are, and that's why they talk.
Yeah.
They talk funny.
What a bunch of old fuckers, eh?
Yeah. Why do they talk funny? Yeah. So, a few facts about the movie I'll share.
Sure.
So, a guy named Barry Keefe wrote the script. Its original title, RJ, The Patty Factor.
Oh my God! What the fuck does that mean?
And he thought that was a good title, The Patty Factor. It's like, yeah, we'll get on the paddy wagon. It's like
sounds like a porno or something.
Oh, it's just fucking stupid. Like, it's so funny. Like, I heard that and I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, they changed it. And it's like, yeah, that was probably a good call. So Bob Hoskins was offered the role while in the hospital with a 40-foot tapeworm inside of him after eating raw meat while making the film Zulu Dawn.
What?
So apparently Bob Hoskins, like, so the movie Zulu Dawn, set down in somewheres in Africa. He was like they had like the actual tribe there, and they offered him some like raw meat for like being part of the tribe or something like that, and he ate it, and then he got a tapeworm, and they had to get it out, and that's when he was like, while in the hospital, they're like, oh hey, you want to be in this movie? And he went, okay.
This makes me feel bad.
Yeah, there's like this one quote there's on the DVD, the Anchor Bay one that I lent you. There's the making of documentary on there, which is where most of this information is coming from. When John Mackenzie says like, when I set out to make this, I said, let's make the best possible film we can. And I'm like, what a hilarious concept. Like, indeed.
Oh, yeah. It's like, oh, no. Hey, why don't we just go make a huge piece of shit?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't think anyone ever sets out to do that unless, like, they're the producers or something.
Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking about with this movie was just, like, how it being shot on location just makes such a huge difference, though. Like, it's just, it's something that you take for granted, especially nowadays where, like, nothing is shot on location because a lot of places don't look like this anymore. And like you were saying, like how you really love the cold opening. It was so weird because like I watched it and I was kind of like I was kind of frustrated because I was trying to remember what was important about this scene. Like I couldn't remember the IRA stuff. I was like, what is all this? And then like by the time they like do the boat scene where it's all laid out, I'm like, oh right, the beginning of the movie. I completely forgot about that.
I will say I do like cold opens, but the scene with the cottage where people are getting shot, like it took me the whole movie to figure that out. And then I was like, oh man. I was like, well, could have been useful to know what that meant like a little earlier in the film. I guess.
Jesus, film.
Yeah, come on, dude.
Yeah.
But no, I do like cold opens, but I do think this one, like, there were certain parts like that one where it's just like, oof. It's like, hurry this up, guys.
Come on.
Come on.
It's pretty late into the movie where they reveal everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention too is Helen Mirren took the role with the understanding that rewrites to her character would be made because I guess like the original character in the script, which like this script sounded like pretty shitty actually. I'm surprised they did like as good a job as they did with it, but it's like she was like a ditzy, like stereotypical female character that like, and Helen Mirren was like, well, I'll do it, but like maybe you could make her like a bit more intelligent. And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll get around to do that. We'll do that. But then they didn't. But I guess like a lot of the like changes with the character that she did was like on set while they were making the movie saying, yeah, this is what the character would say or this is what they would do. The one thing that's like really like which makes me shake my head is like it was like the scene where like they meet up again and she tells Hoskins that like she had to tell the Americans like about what's going on because they figured it out because they're not idiots, and like I guess that was going to lead to a sex scene, but instead they went a different route. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really glad they didn't do that sex scene because it would have been horrendous. Like, especially with the music in this movie, like it would have just been so awkward. Like I couldn't imagine it. It's like, so like, wow, what a great step that was. Because usually they ruin movies with like bad sex scenes, especially in the 70s, where like time just slows right down. The saxophone comes out and people just bump and grind a soft focus. And they didn't do that. So thumbs up to Long Good Friday for not falling down that hole.
It sounds like it was Helen Mirren who made that decision, so that's just one more thing to be thankful for about Helen Mirren.
Yeah. And the other thing I wrote here was, quote unquote, I want to lick every inch of you.
Are you talking to me?
I could be. No, that line is so it's so funny to me.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, that there goes to that sexual tension. And then like it doesn't go anywhere, which is good. They don't do anything else with it. It's like, oh, he's turning on her and whatever. It's like, no, he's just dead now and dead on the floor of a boat.
Yeah. I mean, that line could go either way. Maybe they would have been really into it.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Next time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's like kind of all I've got to say about the movie.
It's just fine.
Yeah, it's like an example of like British gangster movies, but yeah, I was kind of surprised by how little it did for me watching it again.
There's not much to it, eh?
It's not bad, but yeah, it's like just kind of a movie.
Yeah, it's just a movie.
Yeah, but let's see who actually hates this movie, RJ.
Lay it on me.
All right. Matthew Roberts gave this film 2 stars and says, slow, but not in a good way like Tarkovsky.
Oh, fuck.
That, like, no kidding. Feels more like a soap opera than anything else. And I'm like, that's not true at all. I don't know what that means. It's like that weird thing when they always people describe things as being soap opera when they just don't like something. It just doesn't make any sense. Even when it doesn't make sense, they'll say it. But yeah, sorry, Long Good Friday. It's not Tarkovsky. Jack 1704, he gave this 2 stars as well. A bloke at work has been going on about watching this for ages as it is such a quality classic. I can only presume he meant a different film because this is dated, stapled together, and just generally poor. In fact, it only got the mark it did because of the cast. Bob Hoskins is a big-time gangster who, whilst trying to broker a lucrative deal with the Americans, decides to pick a fight with the IRA. Not going to end with a glass of wine and nice chat, is it? It doesn't have an ending. That is just lazy. You piece of paralyzed piss.
Jesus.
Like, if you have any complaint about this movie, it is not the ending.
The ending's like the best part.
It's like people who complain about the ending of No Country for Old Men still.
Oh, fuck off, man. It's the same people who are like, The Sopranos didn't really have an ending. It's like, fuck you.
Yeah, there's another one.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you. Oh God, these things make me so mad. I hate you for doing these.
I love them.
People suck.
Mongoose Commander, I don't know. 2 stars. Am I supposed to care that a bunch of annoying criminals get attacked and cheated out of corrupt land deal? I think. Was this ever really clarified and eventually killed? The Goodfellas guys were charismatic, and the Godfather characters had depth. You could forget they were scummy people and care about them. This just had a dozen assholes being assholes for what felt like an eternity.
Well, yeah, that happens, I guess. But
Like,
I mean,
I think like it's just one of those movies that I don't know. The characters are good. It's got a good ending. It's got good music, but I don't know. It just doesn't have like that wow factor, as I believe Starbucks tells people they're looking for when they're hiring people.
the wow factor.
The wow factor.
Is that
True story.
Is that a sex move?
Well, see, hey, we were talking about how this movie cut its sex scene for like actual character development and feeling. So, yeah, I guess so. Sex move lacks the Starbucks sex move wow factor.
Well, that's lame.
Yep, sure is. Well, that's it, I think.
Yeah, I don't got nothing else to say.
Another one down. Yep. Well, after the break, we're going to take you on a drive somewhere, and there's nothing you can do about it.